welcome back, everybody. Today I want to talk about something that's a bit controversial. And I'm probably going to say some things that are a bit controversial. As I said, this channel is geared towards the new or are about to be new ham. And I've heard this question asked both on the air and in person. Is ham radio dying? It's typically viewed as a elderly white man's hobby, I guess you could say. I don't necessarily agree with that. I can see where that comes from, but I don't necessarily agree with it. I think that viewpoint is a bit outdated, and we need to refresh that. Is ham radio dying? I don't think so. Just in the past 2 years, heck, in the past 1 year, how many new YouTube channels have popped up covering ham radio topics? Not unlike myself, actually. How many live streams are there? How many new clubs are there? And not to mention the new technologies that we're getting into. D-Star, System Fusion, DMR. I myself primarily use P25 for my VHF and UHF communications. I know there's a percentage of hams out there that don't like digital modes, and that's fine. But there's an increasing number of us that do, which is also fine. So I don't think ham radio is dying. I think ham radio is transforming into something new. Traditionally, ham radio has always been viewed as you get on the air and you talk to people, or you get on the air and you use CW or Morse code. And those were the two primary ways of communication for a long time, and still are extremely popular today. But is that the focus? Should that still be the focus, right? I think those two methods are tried and true, right? We've done what we've came to do with those modes, and it's time to see what else we can do, right? The amateur radio service, part of the creed of the amateur radio service is to expand and better the radio art. So I think it's incumbent upon us to embrace new things. And with that new technology and new ways of operating, we're going to get the new operators that come with it. I've been a member of the IEEE for a while now, and part of that comes with a membership to the IEEE Spectrum. And in 2020, they did a piece, The Uncertain Future of Ham Radio, and the subtitle, Software-Defined Radio and Cheap Hardware Are Shaking Up a Hobby Long Associated with Engineering. So, some of you people may already be familiar with him, but so there's and I encourage you to go out and read this article for yourself. I'll put a link to it in the description. It's fantastic. There's some things said in here that I think are going to ruffle some feathers, we'll say. For instance, this paragraph here, and I'll just go ahead. I don't know how, depending on what you're watching this on, you may not be able to read this, but so I'll just go ahead and read it. It says, and I quote, "The number of U.S. amateur licensees has held an anemic 1% annual growth for the past few years, with about 7,000 new licensees added every year for a total of 755,430 in 2018. The U.S. Federal Communications Commission doesn't track demographic data of operators, but anecdotally, white men in their 60s and 70s make up much of the population. And as these baby boomers age out, the fear is there are too few young people to sustain the hobby. Well, okay. They labeled them boomers, I guess. So that's there. Of course, I'm labeled a millennial, so it is what it is. You can't argue with this statement. I mean, yes, there is a large majority of older white men that are in amateur radio. But like I said, that's kind of an antiquated way to look at it. I mean, there is a lot of new people, men and women, getting into the hobby, young and old as well. Not to mention, I mean, it's not just white people getting into it. It's all kinds of people, which is amazing. It's absolutely fantastic. It goes on to say, it's the $60,000 question. How do we get kids involved? Says Howard Michael, former CEO of the American Radio Relay League, or ARRL. Since speaking with IEEE Spectrum, Michael has left the ARRL. A permanent replacement has not yet been appointed. And I think there has too, I guess. This is from 2022. So, there's lots of fantastic other, like I said, you really need to go out and read this whole article yourself. I don't want to read it verbatim for you. That's going to spoil the fun. But so there was another section down here that I wanted to get to, where the author made a pretty interesting point. Let's see here. Right here. And let's just highlight this here. It says, to capture the interest of young people, he urges that ham radio give up its century-long focus on person-to-person contacts in favor of activities where human-to-machine or machine-to-machine communications is the focus. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that. We shouldn't give up entirely person-to-person contact. That's always, as far as I'm concerned, that is always and forever going to be a part of amateur radio. It is the cornerstone on which amateur radio was founded, right next to CW. So to say that we should abandon it is irresponsible at best, right? But human to machine or machine to machine communications. Yeah, I mean, like I said, amateur radio is going through a bit of a transition, and to keep up with the times, amateur radio needs to modernize, right? So we need to embrace things like digital modes of operation, digital HF, FT8, et cetera, et cetera. There's dozens of different digital modes and more coming all the time. And it's not just the digital modes, it's satellite operations. It's doing things like bouncing your signal off the moon and even just, getting into building your own amateur radio transceivers. And, it used to be, and still is, where you build your own transceiver and maybe it's tube driven, but now, building your own transceiver can look like writing software now and doing an SDR or software defined radio. In my point, my point of view is that's just as legitimate as building your own tube driven transceiver. That's just as legitimate as building your own, transistorized solid state transceiver. I think it's absolutely fantastic that we're going to modernize like this. And with that modernization comes new operators. Amateur radio will be fine. It's going to go through its ups and downs, as everything does. But it's going to be fine. As the line from Jurassic Park, life always finds a way, right? So will amateur radio. It's not going anywhere. Let's see, what's this quote say? Ham radio is really a social hobby. Here in Mississippi, you get to 5 or 6 o'clock and you have a big network going on, and some of them are half drunk chatting with you. Well, originally coming from North Carolina, that's a very southern statement, and I love it. Oh, that's great. But that's, like I said, I still prefer the person-to-person contact, getting on your local repeater and talking to people, getting on HF and talking to new people. I don't know that drinking and getting on the air is necessarily the best idea, especially if you're underage. Don't do that. But it could sure make things interesting, I'm sure. Martin Jew from MFJ. We all know him, right? There isn't a ham alive, I bet, that doesn't have some piece of MFJ equipment in their shack. That's just a guarantee, right? Even if you've never purchased an MFJ piece of equipment, at some point, you're going to be rummaging through your stuff and you're going to find something. It will have just materialized there at some point. Amateur radio and MFJ, they're just made for each other, right? You can't have one without the other. So, and while never personally meeting Martin, I think Amateur Logic, and another amazing channel, by the way, check them out, Amateur Logic TV. They did, and this was, I think, 6 or 7 years ago. They did a piece where they interviewed Martin Jew, and they did a tour of the MFJ factory. And man, if Martin doesn't sum up amateur radio, I don't know what does. I mean, what an amazing person. And perfect example of what you can do in amateur radio. Everything he does is amateur radio related, right? He still got some. He doesn't get on the air as much as he used to, but he's built an entire company around ham radio. So it's not just getting on the air and working CW or phone contacts. There's so much more to it. Here's the next quote. It'll all be digital at some point, right at the antenna, all the way until it becomes audio. Yeah, sure. Yeah. SDR transceivers have been around for quite some time now, and they're only getting better. Some drawbacks to SDR receivers. They take a bit more technical knowledge, how to work on them, right? You have to be more familiar with electronics if you want to do board level repair or building your own transceiver. But this is all part of improving the hobby, right? Expanding our knowledge of the hobby. And that's, I think, just as necessary as knowing how to get on the air in the first place, right? I'm not saying that you need to become, an electronics engineer or double E or something like that. You certainly can. I know quite a few double E's that are ham radio operators, but it's certainly not required. You have to educate yourself. You educate yourself as much as you want to, basically. If you just want to buy an SDR from ICOM or Yaesu or whoever, and just put it on air and operate, that's fine. That's totally fine. And you don't need to know electronics to do that. But if you want to fix it, if something happens, then that's where the electronic knowledge is going to come into play, right? But I'm starting to ramble here. Anyway, I would encourage you to, like I said, I'll put a link in the description. I would encourage you all to go read this article. And you don't have to be a member of the IEEE to read it. It's out there on the internet. So, you'll probably get a couple pop up saying, you need to have an account or whatever. You don't just click past it. So in summation, ham radio isn't dying. It's not even really slowing down. From my point of view, we're getting lots of new operators, lots of cool and fun technology, lots of interesting and new things to learn. I mean, who doesn't like learning? Sure, if you're content with what you know and you don't You don't want to learn anything new? That's totally fine too. You know, there's plenty of stuff for you to do as well, right alongside everybody else. But I think what we're going to see is this transition towards a more digital amateur radio, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's just it's progress. I mean, you can't fight. I mean, you can try and fight progress, but in the end, I mean, you're just hurting yourself basically. It's kind of slowing everybody else down. So what do we do? And what as amateur radio operators are we supposed to do? I say we go with it. You know, in the early years of amateur radio, you know, when it was all tube driven gear, and all of a sudden you started seeing solid state stuff get on the air. Ooh, man, you know, silicon was gonna kill amateur radio. It's the same argument, and it's not just amateur radio. You hear that argument in all sorts of different walks of life. You know, it's just the natural progression of things. As humans, we're naturally curious. We like learning new things. We apply those new things we learn to things we like to do in our free time. Not unlike ham radio. How can we make it better? You know, we should be encouraging one another to push the boundaries of what amateur radio is capable of. It's not just getting on the air and talking to people. It's not just, you know, partaking in Skywarn. You know, it's not just CW. All these things are a part of amateur radio, and they're never going to go away. And that's a beautiful thing. But the new stuff that's coming in, the digital mode, software-defined radio, you know, DMR, P25, System Fusion, etc. You know, it's all absolutely amazing stuff. And I think if we really want the hobby to take off, and we really want to get the next generation of amateur radio operators, the people who are going to carry the torch of amateur radio into the future, they got to do what they want to do with it, right? I mean, you know, the current generation got to do what it wanted to do with amateur radio. It's time to pass the torch, basically. And well, I don't think we're going to be disappointed on where this goes. It's going to be absolutely amazing, and I'm absolutely beside myself with excitement to be a part of it. You know, 10 years ago, I would have never thought that I'd be sitting here making a video for YouTube talking about ham radio and all the different digital aspects of it and whatnot. But here we are. You know, I'm embracing change. I'm not saying because I embraced it, you should embrace it. I can encourage you to, right? That's part of the, you know, improving the radio art, right? We need to encourage one another to push the boundary of amateur radio. Anyway, I've said that I don't know how many times now. Anyway, with that, and go out there and make new friends in amateur radio. See what new thing there is to do. Push your limits. Learn something new. You won't be disappointed, right? Make mistakes. Who cares? You know, that's what you learn from. It's going to be awesome. I promise you. You're not going to regret it. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up here before I ramble on any further, I guess. I every time I say I want to keep the video short, it ends up being, you know, a 20-minute long video. Anyway, my name is Alan. I wish each and every one of you an absolutely fantastic day. And if you're not having a fantastic day, hope it gets better for you, you know. And remember, be kind to everybody. Everybody is fighting a battle that you know nothing about. So be nice to everybody. Catch you next time.